That Tuesday afternoon unfolded with a particular kind of stillness. The air thick and heavy with the promise of a late summer storm. I was sitting in a sterile examination room, the crinkling of the paper beneath me, the only sound punctuating the silence. I've been putting off this annual physical for weeks, but a persistent tightness in my chest had finally convinced me to go. My doctor, Dr. Clara Monroe, was someone my father had recommended. I knew she was highly respected, but I'd never given her much thought beyond her professional credentials. She was probably in her early 40s with a calm and composed demeanor that immediately put you at ease. Yet, she never registered to me as anything more than a medical professional. That was the beginning and the end of it. So when she walked back into the room holding my chart, I expected the usual clinical rundown, but the look on her face was different. She closed the door gently, the soft click echoing in the small space. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but a few blonde strands had escaped, softening her features. She looked at me not just as a patient, but as a person, and the shift was palpable. I didn't know where to focus my eyes, so I found myself staring at a generic anatomical poster on the wall. A certain tension, sharp and unexpected, suddenly filled the room. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice a soothing alto. "Your blood pressure is a little higher than I'd like to see." She gestured toward the reading on my chart. I gave a nervous chuckle, my own words, feeling clumsy and out of place. "Yeah, work has been pretty demanding lately. I guess I haven't been managing the stress very well." She set the chart down on the counter, her movements deliberate and graceful. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "You do seem stressed," she observed, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I can help with that." I paused for a moment, unsure of how to interpret her words. It felt like an offer that extended beyond a simple prescription or a referral to a specialist. I mean, she was my doctor, but the tone felt different now. I had always perceived her as this authoritative, almost untouchable figure. I never imagined. Deep search and curiosity suggested she was genuinely interested in what I had to say. That was when something inside me began to shift. I started to see her in a completely new light. There was so much more to her than the white coat and the stethoscope. Then she offered another soft, enigmatic smile. "Ethan, you're still so young," she said. "It's important to learn how to manage these things before they take over. I remember when your father first came to see me, worried about the very same things. I didn't know what to reply, so I just managed a small nod. A new kind of energy was crackling between us. Something unspoken but undeniably present. I could feel it. A subtle spark, a quiet tension, but I was unsure of what it all meant. What I did know was that I wasn't in any hurry for the appointment to end. She stood up and moved to her small desk in the corner, and my eyes followed her. As she passed, I caught a hint of her perfume, a clean, delicate scent that was a stark contrast to the antiseptic smell of the clinic. And for a fleeting moment, she no longer felt like my doctor. She was just a woman, an individual with her own story, her own burdens, and her own needs. "Thank you for being so open with me," she said, turning back to face me. "I think it's important we get to the root of this." I offered her a small smile in return, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Anytime," I said, and as I left the clinic, I couldn't shake the feeling that a fundamental boundary had been blurred. Something unspoken had taken root, and I had no idea where it might lead. The next time I saw Clara, it was entirely by chance. I was grabbing lunch at a small cafe downtown, trying to decompress from a stressful morning, when I saw her sitting at a table by the window. She was holding a novel, her brow furrowed in concentration as she read. And for some reason, that simple image struck me. How had I never noticed how naturally beautiful she was? It wasn't just her physical appearance. It was the way she held herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to emanate from her. She possessed an understanding of the world that the rest of us were still trying to grasp. I hadn't expected to see her outside the clinic in front her a simple invitation. "Please call me Clara outside of the office, just grabbing a bite before my afternoon appointments. Are you on your lunch break?" A simple question, yet it blossomed into a full-blown conversation. We talked about books, the city, and other light-hearted subjects. But simmering just beneath the surface was the thrum of something deeper. There was a subtle but tangible electricity in the air. Brief lingering glances, quiet smiles, and then out of nowhere, she asked, "Are you doing anything this evening?" She said it casually, as if the answer didn't matter much, but I could tell she was gently probing. I wasn't sure how to respond. I shrugged. "Not really, just planning a quiet night at home." She smiled faintly. "I have a rare evening off myself. I was thinking of grabbing a drink at the Crimson Lounge later. It will be nice to have some company." The offer caught me completely by surprise. My immediate instinct was to politely refuse. After all, what did we really have to talk about beyond my health? But the way she asked made it incredibly difficult to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself replying, "Yeah, I could do that." And that was it. I had no clue what I was getting myself into. But later that evening, as I walked toward the bar, my chest was tight with a nervous energy. I felt a buzz inside me that I couldn't quite place, as if I was about to step into a new, uncharted territory. When I arrived, the lounge was just as I remembered it, dimly lit with the smooth sounds of jazz filling the air, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere that felt almost too perfect. Clara was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner, nursing a glass of wine. I stood near the entrance for a moment, just watching her, and that's when it hit me. The woman before me didn't feel like the Dr. Monroe I knew from the clinic. She looked the same, of course, yet something about her presence felt more authentic, more unguarded. "Go ahead and have a seat," she said, noticing me, her voice carrying easily over the music. I was just about to monotonous pattern. There was a raw edge to her voice when she said it. She seemed to be releasing years of pent-up feelings, admitting that everything wasn't as perfect as it appeared on the surface. I just listened. I didn't offer any profound advice or deep insights. I simply nodded and gave her the space to speak. Even as I sat there in silence, I was noticing things. The way her eyes would light up when she talked about something she was passionate about. The genuine, unforced sound of her laughter. She wasn't just my doctor anymore. She was a woman. She had her own thoughts, her own feelings, and a life entirely her own. "Thank you," I said as we finished our drinks, and I motioned for the check. She smiled at me, and for a brief moment I saw something deeper in her gaze. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with anyone." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave her a slight nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. There was a shift between us now, something we didn't need to acknowledge out loud. When I walked her to her car, she gave me a brief hug. It was simple, relaxed, and warm, but her hand lingered on my back for a fraction of a second too long. And that single moment stayed with me. "Take care, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My mind was spinning as I walked back to my own car. The evening had seemed so simple, yet it had managed to unlock something within me. I couldn't put my finger on it. She hadn't done anything overtly inappropriate, but the way she looked at me, the way she listened, it made me feel like there was something real between us, a connection of a different kind. I had been to countless doctor's appointments in my life, but this was not the same. And I hated how much I found myself thinking about it in the days that followed. I tried to push it out of my mind. I tried to pretend that nothing had happened. A few days later, my friend Nathan called and asked if I wanted to grab a beer. I figured getting out might help clear my head, but as soon as I walked into the brewery, I saw Clara sitting at the bar with a few of her colleagues. She spotted me right away. I should have said goodnight and found Nathan, but I didn't. Instead, I took the empty stool next to her. We talked. We laughed, pretending there was nothing unusual about our interaction. Eventually, Nathan arrived and joined us. The three of us sat there talking about sports, old memories, and the silly things we used to do. Even with the lively chatter all around us, my mind kept drifting. And every time Clara looked my way, I felt it. That shift, that something her laughter or her glances stirred in me. Something I didn't fully understand. We both felt as if we were guarding a secret that neither of us dared to speak. Then at one point, Nathan got up to order another round, leaving just the two of us at the bar. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but the words just tumbled out. "So, Clara, how have you really been?" She paused. Her smile faded slightly, and for a moment, I saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. "I'm okay," she said, her voice quiet. "I've been feeling a bit lonely lately." Her honesty caught me off guard. It was as if she had peeled back another layer, revealing a person I hadn't expected. Someone who wasn't just the unflappable Dr. Monroe. The moment I saw that vulnerability in her eyes, I knew this was different. "I'm okay," she repeated softly. "Just a little lonely." Her admission was a quiet earthquake shaking the foundations of our doctor-patient relationship. "Yeah," I replied, nodding slowly. "I get that. It's not always easy." She returned my nod and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was comfortable, serene even. I wanted to say something more to console her, to lighten the burden she was clearly carrying, but the words wouldn't come. So, I just looked at her, wondering if she truly meant it, or if perhaps she was hinting at something deeper. Nathan returned with our beers, and the moment was broken, but something within me had shifted irrevocably. That night, my perception of Clara was completely transformed. She no longer felt like just a medical professional I saw once a year. There was a different kind of light around her now, a dangerous unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the brewery and the way Clara had opened up to me, her quiet admission of loneliness. Her gaze had lingered on mine as if she were searching for something, an answer, or perhaps just an understanding. There was a weight in the air between us now, a significance that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. I kept telling myself it meant nothing, that it was just a fleeting moment of vulnerability. But I knew better. Nathan and I had always been close. He was my best friend. But lately, even when we were hanging out, I found my thoughts drifting away. Back to her, back to Clara. I hated that about myself. I hated the thoughts that refused to leave me alone. Her smile, the way she carried herself with such grace yet revealed a hidden fragility. She felt different to me now, more real. That Saturday, I decided I needed to clear my head. I called up Nathan and suggested we go to the park and shoot some hoops, just like old times. Maybe if I physically exhausted myself, I could quiet my racing mind. The intrusive thoughts about her, her smile, the way she made me feel, they had to go away. When I got to the court, Nathan was already there practicing his jump shot. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "About time you're late," he teased, passing me the ball. I forced a smile and mumbled something about getting held up. We played hard for the next hour. We were joking, talking trash, and trying to one-up each other, but my head wasn't in the game. My mind was somewhere else entirely, a place that was warm, soft, and deeply confusing. After a while, we took a break, sitting on the edge of the court. Out of the blue, Nathan asked, "Hey man, you doing okay?" He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked over at me. The question threw me. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You've just been distant lately," he said, his gaze fixed on the pavement. "Not your usual self. I don't know if you're stressed out or what, but something feels off. I feel like you're going through something." That hit harder than I expected. I walked through the familiar doors and the scent of antiseptic filled my nostrils. The nurse took my vitals, her expression neutral and professional. Then she left, and there I was, alone again in that small room waiting. The door opened as she walked in. Clara. She was back in her white coat, a chart in her hand, looking every bit the consummate professional. When we entered, she looked up, smiling as if everything was perfectly normal. "Hello, Ethan," she said cordially, but I could see it. There was a weariness in her eyes. Her posture was a little too rigid. I realized she was playing a part. "Hey, Doc," I said, my voice sounding strained to my own ears. "You doing well?" I asked, looking over at her. Clara paused for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yes, it's just been one of those long weeks." I could tell she was deflecting, treating it as nothing. I didn't press the issue, mostly because I didn't know how. My heart was hammering against my ribs, louder than I wanted to admit, so I just sat there. I needed a moment to breathe, to escape the heavy weight that had settled in the room. But as the appointment was wrapping up, after she'd listened to my heart and checked my blood pressure again, she put her stethoscope down. The nurse had already left. We were alone. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice calm yet direct. "Can we talk for a minute?" I turned to face her fully, caught off guard. Yeah, okay. What's up?" She moved closer and the small distance between us seemed to shrink even more. I felt my chest tighten as she approached. I just wanted to thank you for the other night," she said, not quite meeting my gaze. "It meant a lot to me." I swallowed hard, her words hitting me with more force than I anticipated. "Of course," I managed to reply. "You know I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to." She nodded slowly, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. We were suspended in a dense, heavy silence that buzzed with everything we weren't saying. Then, almost as if to shift the topic, she said, "Your father is a good man." I knew I wasn't saying it in the same way anymore. A week passed since that appointment in the exam room. The conversation hadn't been dramatic or explosive, but it lingered with me. Every time I thought about Clara after that, the air around the memory felt different, electrified. I couldn't tell if she felt it, too, or if I was just projecting my own feelings onto our interactions. Regardless, the dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted, and I couldn't shake it. Nathan and I hung out as usual. He laughed, joked, and did his best to keep things light, but it didn't help. My mind was elsewhere. I found myself checking my phone, half expecting a message from a number I didn't have saved. I noticed the small details of my memories with her, like the way her head tilted when she listened intently, and how her eyes met mine for just a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then came the following Saturday. Nathan had plans with his girlfriend, so I was left to my own devices. It wasn't what I had planned, but I didn't mind. The truth was, I needed the solitude. I needed space to try and process what was happening in my head and in my gut. I was sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone when it buzzed with an unknown number. "Hi Ethan, it's Clara Monroe. I was reviewing your chart and had a follow-up question. Would you have a moment to talk?" My heart leaped into my throat. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. "Sure," I typed back, trying to sound casual. A moment later, my phone rang. "Hello. Hi, Ethan." Her voice came through, calm and professional, but I could hear the slight tremor beneath it. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, not at all," I said, my own heart racing. "Everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end. The silence felt heavier. The pretense of a medical call felt thinner. "I've been thinking about our recent conversations," she began, her voice soft and cautious. "And I think I owe you an apology." I looked around my empty apartment, caught completely off guard. This was not where I expected this call to go. "I realize I've been a bit unprofessional," she explained, saying she had been dealing with some personal things and didn't mean to put you think you already know, she said gently. "There's been something between us, and I can't keep pretending it doesn't exist." I froze. Her words hit me squarely in the chest, harder than I had expected. Of course, I had felt it, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel more real, more tangible, and infinitely more complicated. "I'm not trying to make things awkward, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just not sure how to handle this. But I can't keep pretending nothing is happening." I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my TV, my mind racing in a dozen different directions. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was wrong, that I shouldn't be having this conversation. And yet there I was. "I don't want it to be weird either," I said, trying to stay calm and prevent the entire situation from unraveling. "But I honestly don't know what you want me to say." She was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her faint breathing on the other end of the line. The silence was dense, laden with everything we couldn't say. Then she spoke again. "This isn't just about stress, Ethan," she whispered, her voice raw. "I'm not sure what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore. And I don't want to." A tidal wave of emotions washed over me all at once. Guilt, curiosity, desire, fear. I was acutely aware of the risks. I knew what could happen if anyone found out about this. But I also knew the connection we shared was powerful. And a part of me didn't want it to stop. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice wavering. "I mean about whatever this is." I heard her take another breath, this one more steady. "I'm sure." And with that, the invisible line we had been so carefully dancing around vanished completely. We didn't say much else. There was nothing left to say. However, the air had changed. We both felt the change, the weight of what we had just acknowledged. Everything was different after that. It has been 1 year since that phone call. A year of us choosing to keep a secret. A year of balancing the mundane reality of everyday life with the quiet, stolen moments. Something would pinch at the back of my mind. Not because I thought he deserved to know, but because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Nevertheless, I never once second-guessed the choice we made. We both made it together, and no matter how complicated or difficult things became, it always felt right. Clara and I saw each other whenever we could, which wasn't nearly as often as we would have liked. We never pushed the boundaries too far. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the pretense. My father would talk about her with such respect, and I would nod along, my expression carefully neutral, acting as if she were nothing more than my doctor. But those small moments, the quick knowing glance across a crowded room, the discreet smile, the fleeting touch of hands when no one was looking, they became our entire world. Those were the things that held us together. When we were alone, sometimes in her office late at night after the last staff member had gone home, we would talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a concrete plan, just hazy what-ifs and half-formed ideas. But we didn't dwell on it for long. We stayed in the present, in the quiet, in-between spaces where we didn't have to justify ourselves to anyone, where we could simply be. It was a calm Saturday evening, about a year after our relationship had truly begun. I was at Clara's house, sitting on her comfortable couch, a place that now felt more like home than my own apartment. The house was peaceful. We had the place to ourselves. Everything felt normal now, comfortable in a way that had once been utterly foreign. We had learned how to exist in this state, quiet, careful, and deeply connected. We didn't need to constantly talk about our feelings anymore. The relationship had settled into something stable, something real. It had always been unconventional, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Clara sat next to me, looking as beautiful as ever. But there was a softness to her now, an ease in her posture, and a serenity on her face that hadn't been there before. It had taken time, but we had learned how to carry the weight of what we shared. I nodded slowly, my hand finding hers. "Yeah, it's weird," I said. "But it's the good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this. But now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a single thing." She tilted her head, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. "Me neither," she replied gently. "Considering the circumstances, I think we've done remarkably well. I'm glad we kept it between us." Her voice was firm, certain. "It's ours. It's just ours." And she was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built quietly, carefully, and together. "I'm happy," I replied softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there side by side, enveloped in a silence that didn't need filling. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. A year had gone by, a whole year spent hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We had kept a secret. We had protected what we had. And through it all, we had held on to the one thing that mattered most, each other. As the evening wore on in the sky outside, deep into an inky blue, one thought became crystal clear in my mind. This was how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, unconventional, and fraught with risk. But it was ours.